Hello, esteemed gentlemen. The greatest prisons are not built with walls, but with routines. Most men spend their entire lives serving invisible sentences, chained to jobs they hate, relationships that drain them, and identities they outgrew a decade ago. They call it stability, but it's really just well-decorated captivity. Now here's a fact that might rattle you. According to psychological studies, the average man spends over 70% of his mental energy on obligations he didn't consciously choose. Think about that. Most people are too busy living someone else's blueprint to even notice they never wrote their own. This is why the advice of older Sigma males hits differently. They've lived through the traps, dodged the expectations, and carried scars that textbooks don't teach. Their wisdom isn't motivational fluff. It's forged in solitude, betrayal, and walking away from rooms most men would beg to stay in. And yes, they'll give you truths that sting. They'll tell you things you don't want to hear, like why comfort is secretly killing you faster than failure, or why silence is sometimes louder than charisma. But don't worry, they're not all dark and brooding. Some of them will casually remind you that growing old gracefully usually just means learning how to nap without guilt. So if you're ready to hear the kind of advice that cuts deeper than the usual self-help slogans, stay with me. Because these aren't the polished success tips you'll find in a book. These are the unfiltered, brutally honest 12 pieces of advice every older Sigma male will tell you, whether you're ready or not. Number 1. Silence is only powerful if you can speak without needing to. Silence has a reputation for being powerful, but the truth is, silence by itself means nothing. Anyone can stay quiet. Anyone can avoid speaking. A man who doesn't talk because he's afraid of being challenged or exposed isn't powerful. He's hiding. That's not strength, that's fear with a mute button. Real silence only carries weight when you actually have something worth saying, but choose not to. That's the difference. If people know you're capable of commanding attention with your words, your silence becomes a presence. It's the tension of the unsaid. It's the moment everyone realizes you don't need to join every conversation because you already own your ground. You've probably seen people mistake silence for wisdom when really it's just insecurity dressed up. They're quiet because they're unsure, not because they're calculated. And here's the brutal truth. People can sense the difference. There's a silence that feels empty, like someone disappeared into the wallpaper. And there's a silence that feels heavy, like a storm holding itself back. One gets ignored, the other gets respected. Older Sigma males understand this distinction deeply. They've lived through years of being underestimated because they weren't loud, and they've also seen how silence can tilt a room when it's backed by confidence. Their advice is simple but sharp. Don't use silence as a shield, use it as a weapon. Speak less, but when you do speak, make sure every word has weight. That way, people learn to listen even when you're saying nothing. Think of it like this. Your silence should never feel like you've vanished. It should feel like you're watching, calculating, deciding whether it's even worth responding. That kind of silence puts pressure on others, not on you. And when you finally decide to break it, the impact is multiplied. In the end, silence isn't about shutting the world out. It's about making the world lean closer. But that only works if your silence is chosen, not forced. The man who can speak but doesn't is mysterious. The man who stays quiet because he can't hold his ground is invisible. Know the difference, and you'll never have to raise your voice to dominate a room. Number 2. Never forget that freedom has a price tag. Freedom is one of those words everyone loves to throw around. But few people are willing to pay the price it actually demands. People talk about wanting freedom in the same way they talk about wanting wealth or love, like it should come naturally, without sacrifice. But the older Sigma male knows better. Freedom has a cost, and if you're not prepared to lose things that most people cling to, you don't really want it. The cost isn't always obvious. It's not just about leaving a job or ending a relationship. The real price of freedom is comfort. To be free, you have to let go of the security blankets that everyone else clings to. The steady paycheck, the approval of family, the safety of predictable routines. Freedom forces you to trade uncertainty for risk. It demands that you give up applause for solitude and stability for responsibility. That's why most people will talk about it, fantasize about it, but never actually choose it. Older Sigma males understand this because they've lived through it. They've had to walk away from paths that promised safety but killed their spirit. They've endured the judgment of others who couldn't understand why anyone would reject what society calls success. They've felt the loneliness that comes with living outside the herd. And yet they'll tell you that all those costs, as brutal as they are worth it. Because the alternative, living chained to expectations and pretending it's happiness, is far more expensive in the long run. Freedom also costs you relationships. Not everyone can handle a man who refuses to be owned, managed, or molded. Some people will leave because they mistake independence for rejection. Others will resent you because your choices remind them of their own cowardice. That's part of the payment. You'll lose people, but you'll gain yourself. At its core, freedom demands that you choose it again and again, even when it hurts. It's not a one-time decision, it's a constant transaction. You keep paying for it with your comfort, your certainty, and sometimes your connections. But the reward is priceless. A life that's truly yours, unborrowed, unbent, and unashamed. Those who aren't ready to pay will never know what that feels like. Number 3. Detach from your younger self's dreams without guilt. Most people romanticize the dreams they had when they were young as if holding on to them forever is a sign of integrity. But the truth is, the goals that made sense at 20 can suffocate you at 40. What you once saw as the ultimate purpose may no longer fit the person you've become. The older Sigma male understands this better than most. He knows that evolution demands letting go, even of the things that once defined him. When you're young, your ambitions are usually borrowed. They're stitched together from what you've been told matters: money, status, proving yourself to your peers, winning admiration. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's the fuel that gets you moving. But as you grow, you start to realize some of those dreams were never really yours. Or worse, they belong to a version of yourself that no longer exists. Holding on to them is like wearing clothes that don't fit anymore. You can keep squeezing into them, but all you're doing is choking your growth. The hard part is that society loves to guilt you for changing direction. They'll call it quitting or accuse you of wasting potential. But that guilt is a trap. You're not betraying your younger self when you drop a dream. You're honoring the fact that you've outgrown him. That's what evolution looks like. Recognizing that the path you once thought would make you feel alive might now be the very thing suffocating you. The older Sigma's advice is clear. Never stay chained to a dream just because it was once your identity. There's no shame in closing a chapter you've already read to its end. In fact, the courage to drop it is what separates those who keep progressing from those who stay stuck in nostalgia, reliving past ambitions that no longer fit their reality. In the end, detaching from old dreams isn't failure. It's freedom. It's giving yourself permission to redefine what matters as you change. You're not supposed to want the same things forever, because you're not supposed to stay the same person forever. The man who accepts this truth doesn't just survive aging, he thrives in it, unchained and unashamed. Number 4. Control who knows your weakness, not just who sees your strength. Strength is easy to display. Anyone can flex their achievements, broadcast their wins, or show off their confidence. That's the surface-level performance most people buy into. But real power doesn't lie in how loudly you project strength. It lies in how carefully you protect your weaknesses. The older Sigma male knows this is where the game is actually won. Weaknesses are inevitable. Everyone has them. Fears, habits, blind spots, or soft spots that can be exploited. The problem isn't having them. The problem is letting the wrong people find them. Once someone knows where you're vulnerable, they no longer have to beat your strengths. They can go straight for the crack in the armor. That's why survival isn't about appearing invincible. It's about making sure your vulnerabilities are invisible to those who'd weaponize them. This doesn't mean living paranoid or never trusting anyone. It means being selective. Not everyone who earns a seat at your table earns the right to see what keeps you up at night. Too many people confuse connection with disclosure, as if intimacy automatically requires full access. It doesn't. Older Sigmas learn to separate the two. They can share time, energy, and even affection without ever handing over the keys to their deepest weaknesses. Society glamorizes openness, pushing the idea that strength is being vulnerable with everyone. But that's a dangerous lie. Vulnerability in the wrong hands isn't healing, it's ammunition. The older Sigma male has seen how quickly people can flip, how allies can turn opportunists, and how the very truths you shared in confidence can later be used to corner you. His lesson? Control the flow of information. Your weaknesses should be a currency you spend only with those who've proven they'd protect it like their own. The real mark of maturity isn't broadcasting what hurts you. It's knowing who can be trusted with it, and more importantly, who cannot. The man who guards his weaknesses wisely doesn't need to look bulletproof to the world because nobody ever gets close enough to pull the trigger. That's not paranoia. That's survival disguised as calm. Number 5, don't confuse peace with powerlessness. Peace is one of the most misunderstood states a man can reach. People often confuse it with weakness, as if being calm means being incapable. But older Sigma males know peace is not the absence of strength. It's the restraint of it. It's the quiet confidence that you could burn everything down if you wanted to, but you choose not to because you don't need to. Powerlessness and peace might look the same on the surface, but the energy behind them is completely different. Powerlessness is silence because you have no voice. It's stillness because you can't move. It's compliance because you have no other option. Peace, on the other hand, is a deliberate choice. It's the man who knows exactly how much damage he could cause, but decides it's not worth his energy. That's not weakness. That's mastery. Older Sigmas reach this point after years of trial, conflict, and solitude. They've fought battles, both external and internal, and they've learned the cost of chaos. They don't need to prove their strength at every turn because they've already proved it to themselves. They don't explode at every provocation because they understand some fights are traps designed to drain them. And most importantly, they don't need to remind the world they're dangerous. The world feels it in their calm. What unnerves people is that kind of peace. When someone can't tell whether you're disengaged because you don't care or because you've already calculated 10 different ways to end them, they tread carefully. That's the Sigma's advantage. His peace is not about surrender, it's about control. He can sit in stillness, not because he's harmless, but because he has nothing left to prove. The lesson is this: peace isn't pretending you don't have a sword. It's knowing you have one sharp enough to end the fight, and being disciplined enough to leave it sheathed. Weak men avoid conflict because they fear the outcome. Strong men avoid conflict because they've already mastered it. The older Sigma male chooses peace not because he can't flip the table, but because everyone in the room knows he could. Number 6. Keep people guessing which chapter they walked into. Predictability is the fastest way to lose your edge. The moment people believe they've figured you out, they stop respecting you and start planning around you. Older Sigma males understand this better than anyone. Once others can predict your moves, you've lost the element of danger. You've become part of their script instead of the unknown factor that forces them to adjust. Keeping people guessing isn't about faking personalities or being inconsistent for attention. It's about evolution. It's about refusing to stay trapped in one version of yourself simply because others are comfortable with it. People love labels. They want to box you in, summarize you, and make you simple to understand. But the Sigma knows that once you're fully understood, you're no longer a threat. You've been decoded, you're predictable. And predictable men are replaceable, so he shifts, sometimes subtly, sometimes dramatically, but always on his own terms. If they think they've got him pegged as detached, he shows a flash of intensity. If they assume he's unreachable, he reveals just enough vulnerability to throw them off balance. If they expect him to react, he does nothing. If they expect silence, he speaks with precision. The point is not to be chaotic. The point is to remind people that no one owns the blueprint to his soul. This keeps people unsettled in the best way. They never fully know which chapter of you they've walked into, so they tread carefully. That uncertainty is power. It forces others to approach you with caution, with curiosity, and sometimes even with respect, because they can't predict whether today you'll be the observer, the strategist, or the disruptor. Older Sigma males have learned that reinvention is survival. Life changes, people change, environments change, and staying the same version of yourself for the comfort of others is just slow death. The danger comes from your ability to shift narratives before anyone memorizes your script, because once they believe they know your ending, they stop fearing your story. The man who cannot be fully read can never be fully controlled. That's why the Sigma keeps rewriting his chapters, not for applause, but for power. Number 7, discomfort is proof. You're still growing, not that you're lost. Most people are trained to chase comfort as if it's the ultimate reward for surviving life. Get a stable job, find a predictable routine, buy things that make you feel secure, and settle into a version of existence that doesn't rattle you. But older Sigma males know the brutal truth. Comfort is rarely growth. In fact, too much comfort is usually decay disguised as success. Discomfort is the body and mind's way of telling you that you're moving into new territory. It's the friction of evolution, the signal that you're stretching beyond what you've already mastered. People misread this as being lost. They panic the moment life feels uncertain, when in reality, uncertainty is the only proof that something in them is still alive and expanding. If everything feels too safe, it's usually because nothing inside you is changing. You're not secure, you're stagnant. Society doesn't like this message because it thrives on keeping people predictable. It celebrates the man who stops chasing, who calls it maturity when he trades risk for routine. But older Sigmas reject that script. They understand that settling down often means slowing down, and slowing down often means shrinking into irrelevance. Growth always carries a cost, fear, discomfort, and sometimes loneliness, but it's the only cost worth paying. What sets the Sigma apart is how he interprets that discomfort. Where most see it as a warning to retreat, he sees it as a compass pointing toward his next level. He doesn't equate unease with failure. He equates it with proof he's not rotting in place. That mindset keeps him evolving long after others have plateaued, clinging to comfort while wondering why their lives feel so hollow. The lesson is clear. If you wake up every day wrapped in safety, repeating the same cycles, unchallenged and untouched by friction, you're not living, you're slowly disappearing. Discomfort is not your enemy, it's your evidence. It means you're pushing beyond yesterday's limits. It means your story is still being written instead of replayed. Older Sigma males don't run from discomfort. They track it, chase it, and use it as confirmation that they're still alive, still dangerous, and still growing. Number 8. Don't hand out loyalty before you see how they handle your silence. Loyalty is one of the most overvalued words in human relationships, mostly because people hand it out before it's earned. The older Sigma male has learned, sometimes the hard way, that real loyalty isn't proven when you're present, generous, or constantly available. It's proven when you go quiet. When you stop feeding someone your time, attention, or energy, you get to see what they really stand on. Silence is the ultimate test. When you're actively engaging, people can easily perform loyalty. They'll mirror your energy, stay close, and act dependable because they're being nourished by your presence. But pull back without explanation and watch how they react. The ones who panic, resent you, or start to badmouth you were never loyal to you. They were loyal to the attention you gave them. The ones who remain steady, patient, and unshaken when you disappear, those are rare, and they're the only ones who deserve a seat close to you. This is why older Sigmas don't rush into alliances. They don't confuse chemistry, enthusiasm, or even affection for loyalty. They observe. They withdraw strategically, not to play games, but to see who collapses when they're not being constantly validated. Silence is like a pressure test. Weak bonds crack, strong ones endure. And here's the bitter truth. Most people will fail this test. That's why older Sigma males are slow to trust. They've seen how quickly "I've got your back" turns into "you've changed" the moment they stop giving. They've watched people switch sides as soon as the benefits dried up. Over time, they learned to value silence not just as a personal tool, but as a filter. If someone can handle your absence without turning sour, they're not with you for what you provide. They're with you for who you are. That kind of loyalty is priceless because it doesn't need constant performance to survive. The rest? They'll expose themselves the moment you stop feeding them. The older Sigma's advice is simple. Don't hand out loyalty like a free sample. Withdraw, go silent, and see who still stands when the noise dies down. That's when you'll know who's real. Everyone else was just there for the energy you gave, not the man you are. Number 9. You'll be hated for saying less than you think, but respected for it later. Most people talk too much because they fear being misunderstood. They rush to explain, to defend, to justify themselves, hoping that clarity will protect their reputation. Older Sigma males know that's a trap. The more you explain, the more ammunition you hand over. The more you talk, the easier it is for people to predict you, box you in, and eventually dismiss you. That's why restraint, saying less than you think, is such a powerful move. But here's the catch. In the short term, people will hate you for it. They'll misread your silence. Some will call it arrogance, as if you think you're too good to explain yourself. Others will label it indifference, assuming you don't care. A few will even call it cowardice, convinced you stay quiet because you're too weak to argue. That's the price of restraint, enduring the misunderstanding while everyone else chatters themselves into corners. Older Sigmas have lived through this misunderstanding enough to know it's temporary. They've watched how time flips the script. The man who says little in the moment is often the one who seems wisest in hindsight. The restraint that was once mocked eventually earns respect, because people realize it wasn't silence born of fear. It was silence born of control. It was the patience to let truth reveal itself without forcing it. That kind of discipline is rare, and it unsettles people. They want you to react, to spill your emotions, to play the game on their timeline. By refusing, you take away their control. You show that you don't need to win every argument today because you're playing on a larger scale. Over time, your restraint separates you from the noisy masses. It makes your words heavier when you finally do choose to speak, because people know you don't waste them. The older Sigma's advice is simple but brutal. Don't confuse being disliked now with being disrespected forever. Let them call you arrogant, detached, or cowardly. If your silence is chosen, not forced, the day will come when those same people realize you weren't weak. You were just patient enough to let the noise burn itself out while you stayed unshaken. That's not weakness. That's strategy. Number 10. Stop treating closure like it's owed to you. Closure is one of those comforting ideas people cling to, as if every wound deserves a final conversation, an explanation, or a clean ending. But older Sigma males know life rarely gives you that luxury. More often than not, things end messily. People disappear without warning, betrayals cut without apology, and some chapters in your life close mid-sentence, leaving you staring at blank pages that will never be filled. Waiting for closure in those moments is like waiting for a train that was never scheduled to arrive. The hard truth is that closure isn't something the world owes you. It's not a gift waiting on the other side of pain. It's a decision you make with yourself. You stop bleeding out over the why and the how, and you accept that some questions have no satisfying answers. The older Sigma understands this because he's lived through it. He's been abandoned, misunderstood, and written out of stories he thought he'd finish. And he's learned that chasing explanations only deepens the wound. People chase closure because they want justice, or at least clarity. But often, even if you got the truth, it wouldn't heal you. It might even hurt more. The betrayal explained doesn't undo the betrayal. The goodbye explained doesn't change the fact that someone left. The story, no matter how neatly it's tied together, is still over. So why spend your energy demanding a punctuation mark in a book that's already been closed? Older Sigmas teach that strength is letting fragments stay fragments. Not everything is meant to be rounded off. Some people are lessons, not lifelong characters. Some endings are abrupt because that's the only way they could be. The refusal to accept that truth keeps people chained to ghosts. The freedom comes when you realize closure is internal, not external. It's not about what they say, it's about what you decide. You decide that the unfinished sentence is still enough. You decide that you don't need their explanation to move forward. That decision, painful as it is, gives you more peace than any forced ending ever could. The Sigma's lesson is clear. Stop chasing closure as if it's owed to you. Life doesn't deal in clean exits. Some stories were only ever meant to end broken, and that's what makes space for new ones to begin. Number 11. Your greatest weapon isn't brutality, it's indifference. Anger is easy to read. The moment you explode, everyone in the room knows exactly where you stand, what offends you, and how to provoke you again. It shows your pulse, exposes your limits, and gives away your position. That's why older Sigma males rarely use rage as their weapon of choice. They've learned that fury might feel powerful in the moment, but it's predictable, and predictable men are easy to disarm. Indifference, on the other hand, is a completely different force. When you stop reacting, you strip people of their control. They can't tell if you're secretly plotting something devastating or if you've simply walked away in your mind. That uncertainty is unnerving. It keeps them second-guessing themselves, replaying every word, wondering if they've lost their grip on you. Unlike anger, which burns fast and loud, indifference is cold, quiet, and suffocating. The Sigma male understands this is what keeps him untouchable. He doesn't need to fight every battle or show that he's hurt. His ability to detach, without drama, without performance, is more destructive than any outburst. It robs manipulators of their satisfaction, it starves enemies of the reactions they crave, and it makes allies more careful, because they know losing his attention is more dangerous than sparking his rage. Indifference doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you've mastered your emotions enough to decide which ones deserve an audience. The older Sigma has felt betrayal, anger, and disappointment like anyone else, but instead of pouring that energy into noise, he converts it into silence that unsettles the room. That silence becomes leverage. It makes people question whether they matter to you at all, and that question eats at them far longer than your anger ever could. Brutality may intimidate, but indifference destabilizes. Brutality shows force. Indifference makes people paranoid about what force you might be hiding. One reveals your hand, the other keeps the deck in your control. That's why the older Sigma's deadliest weapon isn't how loud he can roar, but how calmly he can vanish, how easily he can withhold, and how ruthlessly he can show that he simply doesn't care. When anger fades, indifference lingers, and nothing unsettles people more than realizing they no longer have the power to matter. Number 12. Every room has a currency. Don't pay with the wrong one. Every environment operates on an unspoken economy. The people in it value certain traits above others, and those traits become the currency you need if you want to move with influence. Most men miss this completely. They assume one approach works everywhere. Be likable, be dominant, be agreeable. But older Sigma males know that every room has its own economy, and if you spend the wrong currency, you bankrupt yourself before you even realize it. Some rooms run on charm. People there want to be entertained, impressed, or made to feel good about themselves. If you walk in with cold logic and hard proof, you'll be dismissed as boring or stiff. In those spaces, charisma is cash. Other rooms run on fear, hierarchical, competitive environments where respect is earned by intimidation, decisiveness, and showing teeth. Show too much friendliness there and you'll get eaten alive. Then there are rooms that run on proof, spaces where talk, charm, and bravado mean nothing unless you can back them with skill, results, or hard facts. If you try to rely on charm there, you'll look shallow. If you try to rely on fear, you'll look insecure. The mistake most men make is believing their default trait is enough everywhere. They overpay with the wrong energy, trying to buy credibility with a currency that doesn't spend in that economy. The Sigma male, on the other hand, studies the room before he invests. He watches what people value, what they reward, and what they punish. Then he chooses which currency to pull from his pocket. Sometimes it's silence, sometimes it's competence, sometimes it's edge, but it's never blind. Older Sigmas know this is why adaptability matters more than consistency. Consistency of character is important, yes, but consistency of strategy is suicide. You can't pay in kindness where the room values dominance, and you can't pay in dominance where the room values proof. The lesson is clear. Figure out the exchange rate before you make a move. because the man who doesn't understand the currency of the room always ends up paying the highest price, his relevance. At the end of the day, the wisdom of older Sigma males isn't about making life easier. It's about making life truer. They strip away the illusions that society feeds you, that comfort is success, that closure is owed, that loyalty is automatic, that peace means weakness. They've lived long enough to see through those lies, and they'll tell you with brutal honesty that the cost of freedom, growth, and authenticity is higher than most people are willing to pay. What they offer isn't a handbook for fitting in, but a blueprint for staying sharp while the world tries to dull you. Protect your weaknesses, keep people guessing, embrace discomfort, and never let anyone replicate what makes you rare. Understand that silence carries more weight than noise, and that indifference can do more damage than rage ever could. Most importantly, remember this: the real danger isn't in losing people, dreams, or even love. It's in losing the edge that makes you capable of carving your own path in the first place. Older Sigma males don't hand down advice to make you comfortable. They hand it down to keep you awake. And if you truly absorb it, you won't just survive the pressures of life, you'll move through them with a kind of quiet force that can't be bought, copied, or broken. That's the legacy of their wisdom, and the challenge they leave in your hands. Don't soften, don't stagnate, don't settle. Stay sharp, stay fluid, stay dangerous, because the man who evolves on his own terms can never truly be caged. In this video, you'll hear 12 brutally honest pieces of wisdom older Sigma males pass down. Lessons carved from experience, solitude, and surviving a world that constantly tries to dull your edge. These aren't clichés. They're truths most people are too afraid to say out loud. You'll discover why silence can be more powerful than dominance, why being replicated is more dangerous than being replaced, why indifference is a sharper weapon than rage, and why losing your edge is the real death no one warns you about. If you're tired of sugar-coated self-help and want the raw perspective of men who learn to walk through life without needing approval, this is for you. Don't just watch, subscribe to the channel, hit like, drop your thoughts in the comments, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. This isn't about fitting in. This is about staying sharp, staying fluid, and never letting the world domesticate you.